The sound of a child's wailing pierced through the thick Wyoming wilderness like an arrow through morning fog, stopping Cole Finnegan dead in his tracks as he made his way back to his cabin with a deer slung over his broad shoulders. He had been living alone in these mountains for nearly 5 years, content with the solitude and silence that came with a life far removed from civilization. But something about the desperate quality of that cry made his chest tighten with an unfamiliar urgency. Setting down his kill carefully against a pine tree, Cole moved toward the sound with the practiced stealth of a man who had learned to read the forest like other men read newspapers, his hand instinctively moving to the knife at his belt, though he sensed no immediate danger beyond whatever had caused such heartbreaking sobs. The crying grew louder as he pushed through a thicket of mountain laurel, and then he saw her, a woman crouched in a small clearing with 2 children huddled against her sides, her dark hair hanging in tangled waves around a face streaked with dirt and what might have been dried blood. She looked up at his approach with wild eyes, one arm pulling the children closer while the other hand gripped a thick branch like a club, and Cole immediately raised both hands to show he meant no harm. The woman could not have been more than 23 or 24, with delicate features that spoke of Eastern refinement despite her current disheveled state, and the fierce protective stance she took reminded him of a mother bear defending her cubs. "Please," she said, her voice hoarse and trembling, "please do not hurt us. We have nothing worth taking." Cole kept his hands raised, staying where he was as he took in the scene more carefully. The 2 children, a boy who looked about 6 and a girl perhaps 4 years old, had the same dark hair and high cheekbones as the woman, though their faces held a rounder, softer quality that suggested they might not be her own. Their clothes were torn and dirty, the girl's dress ripped at the hem, and all 3 of them looked as though they had not eaten properly in days. The woman's dress, once a fine traveling outfit in deep green wool, was now ruined beyond repair, with mud caked on the hem and tears in the sleeves. "I am not going to hurt you," Cole said slowly, keeping his voice low and calm the way he would when approaching a spooked horse. "My name is Cole Finnegan. I live about a mile from here. Are you lost?" The woman's grip on the branch did not loosen, but he saw something shift in her eyes, a flicker of desperate hope fighting against learned caution. "We have been walking for 2 days," she said. "Our wagon overturned in a ravine. The driver is dead. These children, they are my sisters. She died 3 months ago from fever, and I was taking them to their uncle in Montana when the accident happened." Cole lowered his hands slowly, his mind already working through what needed to be done. "You are hurt," he observed, nodding toward her left arm, which she held at an awkward angle. "And those children need food and shelter. I have a cabin not far from here. You will be safe there." "How do I know we can trust you?" the woman asked, though her voice had lost some of its earlier hardness, desperation creeping in around the edges. "You do not," Cole admitted honestly, "but you do not have many other choices out here. The nights are getting cold and I can hear wolves in the distance. They will smell weakness." The little girl started crying again, burying her face in the woman's side, and Cole saw the exact moment when survival instinct won out over fear. The woman lowered the branch and slowly stood, wincing as she put weight on her right ankle. "My name is Keller," she said. "This is Thomas and Emma. If you truly mean to help us, we will accept your kindness." Cole nodded and moved carefully toward them, noticing how Catherine tensed but did not back away. He crouched down to the children's level, giving them what he hoped was a reassuring smile. "I am going to carry Emma," he said gently, "and Thomas, you look like a strong young man. Do you think you can walk if you hold Miss Catherine's hand?" The boy nodded solemnly, his eyes too old for his young face, and Cole felt something twist in his chest at the sight. He had seen that look before, in children who had faced too much hardship too soon, and it never got easier to witness. He scooped Emma up carefully, feeling how light she was, too light, and gestured for Catherine and Thomas to follow as he led them back to where he had left the deer. "I need to carry this too," he said, indicating the kill. "Food for tonight." Catherine nodded, and Cole maneuvered until he had Emma settled on one shoulder and the deer slung over the other, a heavy load but one he could manage for the mile walk back to his cabin. Thomas held Catherine's hand tightly, and the small group made their way through the forest as the afternoon sun began its descent toward the mountain peaks. Cole found himself glancing back frequently to make sure Catherine could keep up, noticing how she limped and how pale her face had become, but she never complained or asked to rest. The cabin came into view as they crested a small hill, a sturdy structure Cole had built with his own hands from pine logs, with a stone chimney and a covered porch that faced east to catch the morning sun. It was not much, but it had kept him warm and dry through 4 hard winters, and it would serve these unexpected guests well enough. He pushed open the door and ushered everyone inside, setting Emma down gently on his bed while Catherine sank into the wooden chair near the cold fireplace, looking as though her legs might give out at any moment. "Stay here," Cole instructed, already moving to start a fire. "I will get this going and then tend to your injuries." He worked quickly, his hands sure and steady as he built up the kindling and struck a spark, coaxing the flames to life. The cabin was sparse but clean, with a bed in one corner, a small table with 2 chairs, shelves lined with preserved foods and supplies, and hooks on the wall holding his extra clothes and gear. It was the home of a man who lived simply and without excess, everything serving a purpose, nothing merely decorative. Once the fire was crackling, Cole turned his attention to his guests. He pulled out dried venison and hardtack from his stores, along with a jar of wild honey, and set it on the table. "Eat slowly," he warned. "Your stomachs will not be used to food after going without." Thomas needed no further encouragement, reaching for the venison with eager hands, but Catherine stopped him with a gentle touch. "What do we say?" she prompted softly. "Thank you, sir," Thomas said dutifully, and Emma echoed him in a small voice. Cole felt an unfamiliar warmth spread through his chest at the simple courtesy, a reminder of civilization and human connection he had not realized he missed. "You are welcome," he said gruffly, then turned to Catherine. "Let me look at that arm." She extended it reluctantly, and Cole could see even through her sleeve that it was swollen. He worked the fabric up carefully, his fingers gentle despite their rough calluses, and examined the injury with practiced eyes. He had set bones before, for himself and occasionally for injured animals, and he could tell this was a bad sprain but likely not broken. Her ankle would need attention too, but first things first. "This will hurt," he warned before wrapping her arm firmly with strips of clean cloth he kept for such purposes, securing it against her body to prevent movement. Catherine bit her lip but made no sound of complaint, and Cole found himself impressed by her fortitude. Most people he had known would be crying out in pain, but she sat still and silent, her eyes on the children as they ate. "Thank you," she said quietly when he finished. "You are skilled at this." "A man learns to tend his own wounds when he lives alone," Cole replied, moving to examine her ankle next. He unlaced her boot carefully and eased it off, revealing a swollen joint that had turned an ugly purple-black. "This needs to stay elevated. No walking for at least a few days." "I cannot simply lie about while you care for us," Catherine protested. "We are already too much of a burden." "You will do what needs to be done to heal," Cole said firmly, "or you will do permanent damage. Besides, the children need you healthy." That argument seemed to settle the matter, and Catherine nodded reluctantly as Cole helped her move to the bed, where she could prop her ankle up on his spare blanket, rolled into a cushion. The children had finished their small portions of food and were looking around the cabin with wide, curious eyes, their earlier fear giving way to the natural resilience of youth. "There is a stream about 50 yards behind the cabin," Cole said. "In the morning, I will show you where to wash up. For tonight, try to rest. I will sleep on the floor." "We cannot take your bed," Catherine started, but Cole cut her off with a shake of his head. "You need it more than I do. I have slept on harder ground than cabin floor." He paused, then added, "Tomorrow I will start preparing the deer. We will have proper meals soon enough." The evening passed quietly, with Cole tending to small tasks around the cabin while Catherine and the children settled into an exhausted sleep. He found himself watching them despite his best efforts to mind his own business, struck by the way Catherine kept one hand on each child even in sleep, that protective instinct never fully relaxing. She was beautiful, he realized, even dirty and injured and worn down by hardship. There was something compelling about the strength in her face, the determined set of her jaw, the gentle way she had spoken to the children despite her own pain. Cole shook off such thoughts and focused on practical matters. He would need to hunt more game to feed 4 mouths instead of 1, and he would need to check his supplies of flour and salt and other staples. There was also the matter of what would happen once Catherine healed enough to travel. The nearest town was Castle Dome, a rough mining settlement about 30 miles southwest, and Montana was still hundreds of miles north. The children's uncle might not even know they were coming, might not be expecting to suddenly take on 2 young ones, but those were problems for another day. For tonight, Cole built up the fire against the autumn chill and made himself as comfortable as possible on the floor near the hearth, using his coat as a blanket and his spare shirt as a pillow. Sleep came slowly, his mind too full of unexpected complications and the soft sound of Catherine's breathing in the darkness. He woke before dawn, as was his habit, and slipped outside to begin the work of processing the deer. The cold morning air cleared his head, and he fell into the familiar rhythm of the task, his knife moving with precision as he skinned and butchered the animal, setting aside the best cuts for cooking and preparing the rest for smoking and preservation. The sun was just beginning to paint the mountain peaks gold when he heard the cabin door creak open and turned to see Thomas standing on the porch, watching him with solemn eyes. "Good morning," Cole said. "You are up early." "I wanted to help," Thomas said. "Aunt Catherine says everyone should earn their keep." Cole studied the boy for a moment, seeing pride and determination in that young face. "How old are you, Thomas?" "7, sir. Almost 8. "That is old enough to learn useful things," Cole agreed. "Can you carry water from the stream?" Thomas nodded eagerly, and Cole showed him where the buckets were kept, explaining how to fill them only halfway so they would not be too heavy. The boy set off with purpose, and Cole returned to his work, oddly pleased by the company. By the time the sun had fully risen, he had several pounds of venison ready for cooking and had started a smoking rack to preserve the rest. Catherine appeared on the porch mid-morning, leaning heavily on a walking stick Cole had left by the bed. "I told you not to walk on that ankle," he said without looking up from tending the smoking fire. "I needed to see to the children," she replied, her voice carrying a hint of defiance that made him hide a smile. "Emma is still sleeping and Thomas is being useful," Cole said. "You should rest." "I have been resting for hours. I will go mad if I lie in bed any longer." Catherine made her way down the porch steps carefully, wincing with each movement, and Cole found himself moving to her side before he consciously decided to do so, offering his arm for support. "Stubborn," he muttered. "Practical," she countered, but she took his arm, and Cole felt the warmth of her hand through his sleeve, aware of her presence beside him in a way that made him uncomfortable and pleased in equal measure. They stood together watching Thomas return from the stream, the bucket held carefully in both hands, and Catherine's expression softened into something tender and proud. "He has been so brave through everything," she said quietly. "They both have. Their mother, my sister Margaret, she died so suddenly. One day she was fine, the next she was burning with fever, and within a week she was gone. Their father died 2 years before in a mining accident. I am all they have left except for their uncle, and I have never even met the man. Margaret married him before moving west, and I only know his name and that he works a ranch somewhere near the Montana border." "That is a lot of uncertainty to carry," Cole observed. Catherine nodded, her eyes distant. "I had no choice but to try. I could not keep them in Philadelphia. I had barely enough money to survive on my own, working as a seamstress, and the orphanages there, they are terrible places. I promised Margaret before she died that I would get Thomas and Emma to family, to someone who could give them a proper home and a future." "That is noble of you," Cole said, and meant it. He had known plenty of people who would have taken the easier path, would have handed the children over to strangers rather than risk everything on a dangerous journey across the country. "It is what family does," Catherine said simply, then turned those clear eyes on him. "What brought you out here so far from everything?" Cole was quiet for a moment, weighing how much to share. "The war," he said finally. "I came back and could not settle into normal life again. The noise, the crowds, the endless chatter about things that did not matter, it all felt wrong. So I came west, kept going until I found a place quiet enough to hear myself think." "Do you ever get lonely?" The question caught him off guard, and he considered it honestly. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But loneliness is easier to bear than feeling alone in a crowd." Catherine nodded as if she understood, and they stood in companionable silence as Thomas proudly showed off his bucket of water. The morning passed in domestic tasks, Cole preparing a proper stew with the fresh venison while Catherine, despite his protests, helped Thomas and Emma wash up at the stream. He had given them clean clothes from his own stores, shirts that hung like dresses on the children, and a pair of his smaller work pants that Catherine had altered with needle and thread she had salvaged from her carpet bag. Over the next several days, a routine established itself. Cole would rise early to hunt or check his traps, returning by mid-morning to find Catherine awake and usually attempting some task despite her injuries. She had a stubborn streak a mile wide, he discovered, refusing to be idle even when it clearly pained her to move. She mended his clothes without being asked, organized his chaotic shelves, and began teaching the children their letters using a charcoal stick and pieces of smooth bark. For his part, Cole found himself adapting to the presence of others with surprising ease. He showed Thomas how to identify animal tracks and which plants were safe to eat. He carved a small doll for Emma from a piece of pine, giving it to her shyly and feeling absurdly pleased when her face lit up with delight. And he talked to Catherine, really talked, in a way he had not spoken to another person in years. They would sit by the fire in the evenings after the children had fallen asleep, and the conversations would range from profound to mundane, touching on everything from philosophy to favorite foods. Cole learned that Catherine had grown up in Philadelphia, the daughter of a schoolteacher and a shopkeeper, that she loved to read but had owned few books of her own, that she missed the ocean even though she had only seen it twice. She learned that he had been a soldier in the war, that he had grown up on a farm in Ohio, that he played the harmonica but had not touched the instrument in years, because music made him remember things he preferred to forget. "Play something," Catherine urged one evening about a week after her arrival. Cole shook his head. "I told you I do not play any more. That is a shame. The children would love it, and I would like to hear." She looked at him with those clear eyes, and Cole felt something in his chest shift, a wall he had built crumbling just slightly. He retrieved the harmonica from the bottom of his trunk, the metal cool against his lips as he brought it up and blew a tentative note. The sound filled the cabin, sweet and melancholy, and before he knew it, he was playing an old folk tune his mother had loved, letting the music flow through him. When he finished, Catherine was smiling, and the expression transformed her face into something radiant. "That was beautiful," she said softly. "It has been a long time," Cole said, his voice rough. "Then I am honored you chose to play again now." Catherine reached out and touched his hand briefly, and Cole felt that simple contact like a spark of electricity, warm and startling. He became acutely aware in that moment of how much he had come to care for these people in such a short time, how the cabin felt more like a home with their presence, how he looked forward to Catherine's smile and the children's laughter. It terrified him, this growing attachment, because he knew it could not last. Catherine had a mission, a promise to fulfill, and once she healed enough to travel, they would leave, and his life would return to its former solitude. Except the thought of that solitude no longer brought comfort. Instead, it felt like a prison he had built for himself, and he was not sure he wanted to remain locked inside anymore. 2 weeks after their arrival, Catherine's ankle had healed enough for her to walk without pain, and her arm had recovered its full range of motion. Cole knew he should be glad, should start making plans for their departure, but instead he found excuses to delay. The weather was turning colder, he argued, better to wait until spring. The children were settling in well, no need to disrupt them with more travel just yet. Catherine listened to his reasons with an unreadable expression, neither agreeing nor disagreeing, and Cole wondered if she was making her own excuses to stay. The answer came one afternoon when he returned from hunting to find Catherine standing on the porch, looking out at the mountains with a troubled expression. "We need to talk," she said as he approached. Cole's stomach tightened. "All right." "I have been thinking about the journey to Montana," Catherine began, her voice careful. "About what waits for us there. The truth is, I do not know if Thomas and Emma's uncle will even take them in. Margaret spoke of him, but they never met after her marriage. He might be dead, or moved on, or simply unwilling to care for 2 children he has never seen." "What are you saying?" Cole asked, though he thought he might know, hoped he might know. Catherine turned to face him fully, and he saw vulnerability in her eyes, mixed with determination. "I am saying that maybe we do not need to keep running toward an uncertain future when we have found something good right here." She paused, then added quietly, "The children are happy, Cole. They feel safe. And I find I do not want to leave." Cole's heart was pounding now, his usual careful control slipping. "Catherine, are you sure? This life, it is hard and lonely. No neighbors for miles, no shops or schools or society, just mountains and forest and long winters." "I know what it is," she said firmly. "I have been living it for weeks now, and I would choose it over the uncertainty we faced before. But only if you want us to stay." He closed the distance between them in 2 long strides, taking her hands in his larger, rougher ones. "I've wanted you to stay since the moment I realized you might leave," he admitted. "I was just too much of a coward to say it." Catherine's face broke into a smile, and she squeezed his hands. "Then we will stay, if you will have us." "I will have you," Cole said, and the words felt like a vow. "All of you, for as long as you will stay." They stood there on the porch, hands clasped, while the autumn wind rustled through the pines and the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. Inside the cabin, Cole could hear Thomas and Emma playing some imaginary game, their laughter bright and untroubled, and he felt something he had not experienced in years. Hope for the future, anticipation for tomorrow, the warm certainty that he was exactly where he needed to be. But saying they would stay and actually building a life together were two different things, and Cole knew they had much to figure out. That evening, after the children were asleep, he and Catherine sat by the fire and talked through the practical matters. They would need to expand the cabin before winter truly set in, adding another room for the children so Catherine could have the main room with some privacy. They would need more supplies, which meant a trip to Castle Dome to trade furs and purchase what they could not make or grow themselves. "I have some money," Catherine offered. "Not much, but I was saving it for emergencies. We can use it for supplies." Cole shook his head. "Keep your money. I have pelts and meat to trade. I do well enough on my own, and we will manage." "We are a family now," Catherine said gently. "What I have is yours, and what you have is ours. That is how this works. A family." The word settled over Cole like a warm blanket, and he nodded slowly. "Then we pool what we have and make it stretch. I will start hunting more, and we can trap through the winter. Come spring, we might think about planting a proper garden, maybe getting some chickens if we can manage it." "I can preserve food," Catherine said. "Teach me what grows wild here, and I will put up enough to last through the winter. And I can make proper clothes for all of us. Thomas is growing so fast his pants are already too short." They planned late into the night, their voices low so as not to wake the children, building a future together one practical decision at a time. Cole found himself drawn to Catherine's quick mind and resourcefulness, the way she could turn problems into possibilities. She had a strength that did not come from physical power but from sheer determination and will, and he admired it more than he could express. The next morning, Cole began work on the cabin expansion. He felled trees and stripped them, preparing the logs while Thomas watched with fascination, asking endless questions about how buildings were constructed and why certain woods were better than others. Cole answered patiently, finding he enjoyed teaching the boy, watching understanding dawn in those young eyes. Catherine kept Emma occupied with lessons and play, and in the evenings they would all gather around the fire while Cole played his harmonica, and Catherine sang old songs in a clear, sweet voice. The work was hard but satisfying, and within 3 weeks Cole had framed out a second room and was working on the roof. The weather had turned properly cold now, frost covering the ground each morning and ice forming at the edges of the stream. He worked quickly, racing against the coming snows, determined to have the expansion finished before the worst of winter arrived. Catherine helped where she could, chinking the gaps between logs with moss and mud, hanging oiled cloth over the window opening Cole had cut. She moved around the work site with confidence, her injured ankle fully healed now, and Cole caught himself watching her more often than was strictly necessary, admiring the way she moved, the concentration on her face when she worked, the tenderness in her expression when she looked at the children. He was falling in love with her. He realized one afternoon as he watched her show Emma how to knead bread dough. The knowledge did not frighten him as much as he expected it might. Instead, it felt natural, inevitable, as though everything in his life had been leading to this moment. These people, this fragile and precious thing they were building together. That night, after the children were asleep in their new room, Cole found the courage to speak his heart. He and Catherine sat by the fire as usual, but instead of talking about practical matters, he reached for her hand and held it gently. "Catherine," he began, then stopped, suddenly unsure how to say what he felt. She waited patiently, her hand warm in his, and finally he pushed forward. "I need you to know, these past weeks, having you and the children here, it has changed everything for me. I was content before in my solitude, or at least I thought I was. But now I cannot imagine going back to that emptiness. You have brought light and life into this place, into me, and I have come to care for you deeply." Catherine's eyes had gone bright, and she squeezed his hand. "I care for you too, Cole, more than I thought possible in such a short time. You saved us, gave us safety and shelter when we had nothing, and you asked for nothing in return except our company. You have been kind and patient and good, and I find myself thinking that maybe this was meant to be, that maybe all the hardship was leading us to exactly this place." "I want to do this properly," Cole said. "Court you the right way with respect and honor. I know we are living under the same roof already, and folks might talk if they knew, but I want you to know my intentions are honest." Catherine smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. "I know your intentions, Cole Finnegan. I have seen them in every kindness you have shown the children, in every thoughtful gesture, in the way you look at me when you think I am not noticing. You are a good man, and I would be honored to be courted by you." They sat together long into the night, hands clasped, making quiet plans for the future. Cole spoke of things he had not thought about in years, dreams of having a real home, a partner to share the work and the joys, children of their own someday perhaps, if Catherine was willing. She spoke of her hopes for Thomas and Emma, of wanting to give them a stable, loving home, of building something lasting in this wild, beautiful place. When they finally parted for the night, Cole pressed a gentle kiss to Catherine's forehead, a promise and a blessing, and her smile in response told him everything he needed to know. They had found each other against all odds, two lost souls brought together by fate and a child's cry in the wilderness, and they would make something beautiful from this unexpected beginning. The first snow came in early November, a light dusting that made Emma squeal with delight and had Thomas begging to go outside and play. Cole showed them how to track animals in the fresh snow, how to read the forest story in footprints and broken twigs. Catherine bundled them in layers of clothing. She had pieced together from Cole's spare garments and blankets, and they spent a happy afternoon building a small snowman near the cabin. That night, as they gathered around the fire, Cole looked at the faces illuminated by the warm glow, Catherine's serene beauty, Thomas's eager intelligence, Emma's innocent joy, and felt a contentment so complete it made his chest ache. This was what he had been missing, he realized. Not just the presence of others, but the connections that made life meaningful, the love that transformed a simple cabin into a home. As winter settled in properly, they fell into comfortable rhythms. Cole would check his trap lines in the morning, returning with rabbits and foxes that Catherine learned to skin and prepare. She proved to be a quick study, mastering skills she had never needed in her city life, adapting to the harsh realities of mountain living with remarkable grace. Thomas helped with everything from carrying firewood to feeding the fire, growing more confident and capable each day. Even little Emma had her jobs, fetching water from the barrel they kept inside during the coldest months, and helping Catherine with simple cooking tasks. The heavy snows came in December, sometimes falling for days without stopping, piling up against the cabin walls and covering the world in white silence. Cole had prepared well, and they had plenty of food and firewood to see them through, but the isolation pressed in nonetheless. Catherine grew restless, and Cole could see the cabin fever setting in around the edges, so he made an effort to keep things interesting. He taught them all to play cards using a worn deck he had not touched in years. Catherine turned out to have a competitive streak, and a talent for bluffing that made Cole laugh with genuine delight. He told stories of his childhood and his travels, and Catherine shared tales of growing up in Philadelphia, of her sister Margaret, and the adventures they had shared as girls. The children listened with rapt attention, and Emma would often fall asleep in Catherine's lap, lulled by the sound of her aunt's voice. On Christmas Eve, Catherine surprised them all by producing a small bag of peppermint sticks she had saved from her journey, precious treats she had hidden away for a special occasion. They each got one, and Cole could not remember when something so simple had tasted so sweet. He gave the children small gifts he had carved, a wooden whistle for Thomas and a set of tiny animals for Emma, and presented Catherine with a comb he had traded for months ago in Castle Dome, its handle carved from bone and polished smooth. "It is beautiful," she said, running her fingers over the delicate workmanship. "But Cole, you should not have spent money on something so frivolous." "It is not frivolous if it makes you smile like that," he replied, and was rewarded when she rose on her toes and pressed a soft kiss to his cheek, the first such gesture of affection she had initiated. The touch of her lips against his skin sent warmth flooding through him, and Cole found himself wanting more, wanting everything, but he held himself back. They had time, and he would not rush her, would not press for more than she was ready to give. This courtship, conducted in the close quarters of a mountain cabin with winter raging outside, was unlike any he might have imagined, but it felt right nonetheless. January brought the coldest temperatures Cole had experienced in his years on the mountain, so severe that even going outside to fetch firewood required layers of clothing and limited time in the bitter air. They stayed close to the fire, and Catherine taught the children more advanced lessons in reading and arithmetic, using Cole's few books and making up problems based on their daily life. How many days will the venison last if we eat 2 pounds a day? If Cole's trap line is 3 miles long and he walks it twice, how far has he traveled? Cole found himself learning alongside the children, his own education having been limited and practical. Catherine had a gift for teaching, making even dry subjects interesting, and he appreciated her patience when he struggled with concepts that came easily to Thomas's young, nimble mind. In turn, he taught her about the wilderness, about reading weather signs and understanding animal behavior, knowledge that could mean the difference between life and death in this unforgiving land. They grew closer through these long, dark months, not just in affection but in understanding and trust. Cole saw Catherine at her worst, frustrated and tired and worried about their dwindling supplies, and loved her all the more for her humanity. She saw him wrestle with dark memories on the nights when old nightmares woke him gasping, and she never asked for explanations he was not ready to give, simply sat with him until the shadows receded. February brought a brief thaw, and Cole seized the opportunity to make the journey to Castle Dome. He had not wanted to leave Catherine and the children, but they needed supplies, salt and flour and other staples running dangerously low. Catherine had argued that she should come with him, but Cole insisted she stay with the children where it was safe. The journey was dangerous in winter, the trails treacherous with ice and the weather unpredictable. "I will be back in 5 days," he promised. "A week at most if the weather turns bad. You have the rifle and plenty of ammunition. Keep the fire going and do not open the door to anyone you do not know." "Be careful," Catherine said, and the worry in her eyes told him how much she had come to care, how much she would miss him in his absence. Cole almost kissed her then, almost gave in to the urge that had been building for months, but Thomas chose that moment to run up asking questions about the journey, and the spell broke. Cole ruffled the boy's hair and shouldered his pack, setting off into the cold with a strange reluctance weighing his steps. Castle Dome was exactly as he remembered. A rough collection of buildings clustered around played-out silver mines, full of desperate men and harder women trying to scratch out a living from unforgiving earth. Cole did his trading quickly, exchanging furs for supplies and answering as few questions as possible about his circumstances. The last thing he needed was curious miners deciding to pay a visit to his isolated cabin. He was loading his pack at the general store when he overheard a conversation that made his blood run cold. Two men were talking about a woman and children who had gone missing months ago, a wagon accident somewhere in the mountains, search parties that had found nothing but wreckage. There was family back east offering a reward for information, wanting to know what had become of Catherine Keller and her sister's orphaned children. Cole's mind raced. He should say something, should tell these men that Catherine and the children were safe, but something stopped him. If word got back to Philadelphia that they had been found, someone might come to take the children, might decide Catherine was unfit to care for them and place Thomas and Emma in an institution. The thought of losing them, of his carefully built family being torn apart by well-meaning but ignorant interference, filled him with cold dread. He kept silent, finished his business, and left town as quickly as possible, his pack heavy with supplies and his heart heavier with secrets. The journey back took 3 days through fresh snow, and he had plenty of time to think about what he had done, the lie of omission he had committed. Should he tell Catherine what he had learned, or would the knowledge only burden her with impossible choices? The cabin came into view on the afternoon of the 3rd day, smoke rising from the chimney in a welcoming spiral, and Cole felt his spirits lift despite his troubled thoughts. He had barely reached the porch when the door flew open, and Emma came running out, squealing his name and launching herself at his legs with such force he nearly lost his balance. "You are back," she cried. "We missed you so much." Thomas appeared in the doorway with a grin, and behind him Catherine, her face alight with relief and something else, something that made Cole's breath catch. "Welcome home," she said softly, and the word home had never sounded sweeter. That night, after the children were asleep and the supplies had been put away, Cole sat with Catherine and told her everything he had overheard in Castle Dome. He could not keep this secret, he realized, could not build a life based on deception, even if his motives were protective. Catherine deserved to know the truth and make her own choices. She listened in silence, her face growing pale, and when he finished she was quiet for a long moment. "What do you think I should do?" she asked finally. "I think," Cole said carefully, "that you should do whatever gives you peace. If you want to send word back east that you are all safe, I will support that. If you want to keep living quietly here and hope no one ever asks questions, I will support that too. But Catherine, you need to know that I want you to stay. I want all of you to stay permanently. Not just until spring or until some other plan works out, but always." "What are you saying, Cole?" He took a deep breath, knowing this was perhaps the most important moment of his life. "I am saying that I love you, Catherine Keller. I love you and Thomas and Emma, and I want us to be a real family. I want to marry you properly and legally, and adopt those children as our own if you will let me. I am not a rich man and this life is hard, but I will work every day to make you happy and keep you safe. So I am asking, will you marry me?" Catherine's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling and she reached for his hands with both of hers. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will marry you, Cole Finnegan. I love you too, more than I knew it was possible to love someone I have known such a short time. You are good and kind and honorable, and there is no one else I would rather build a life with." Cole pulled her close then, finally, his arms going around her as she pressed against him, and he lowered his lips to hers in a kiss that held all the longing and love and promise he could not put into words. Catherine kissed him back with equal fervor, her hands coming up to frame his face, and for a long moment the world narrowed to just the two of them and the perfect rightness of being together. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Catherine laughed softly. "I have wanted you to do that for months," she admitted. "I have wanted to do it since the day you smiled at me over that first pot of stew," Cole confessed, and she laughed again, the sound pure joy. They talked for hours that night, making plans for the future with an urgency born of finally being honest about their feelings. They would travel to Castle Dome in the spring, Cole decided, and find a circuit preacher to marry them properly. In the meantime, they would tell the children, would begin building the family they all wanted in truth as well as practice. Thomas and Emma took the news with an enthusiasm that made Cole's heart swell. Thomas asked if he could call Cole Papa now, and Emma immediately started planning what she would wear to the wedding. The questions came fast and furious. Would they have more brothers and sisters? Could they get a dog? Would they always live on the mountain? Cole answered each question patiently, making promises he intended to keep. Yes, they would stay on the mountain because this was home. Yes, they could get a dog when spring came and the puppies were available in town. And as for brothers and sisters, well, that would be up to God and Catherine, but he hoped so, he very much hoped so. The rest of the winter passed in a golden haze of happiness. Cole had never imagined himself capable of such contentment, waking each morning to Catherine's smile and the children's laughter, ending each day with Catherine in his arms as they planned and dreamed together. They were careful about propriety, Catherine sleeping in the main room while Cole took the children's room with Thomas and Emma, but the stolen kisses and tender moments they shared were precious beyond measure. As February turned to March, and the first hints of spring appeared in the melting snow and budding trees, they made final preparations for the journey to Castle Dome. Cole traded furs for a simple gold band, and Catherine altered her one remaining good dress, the green traveling suit she had arrived in, mending it carefully until it looked almost respectable again. They set out on a warm morning in early April, the journey taking 2 days with the children, camping one night under the stars. Cole showed Thomas how to build a proper fire and set up a camp, while Catherine braided Emma's hair and told stories. They arrived in Castle Dome looking like what they were. A family, road-worn but happy, ready to make their union legal in the eyes of God and man. The circuit preacher happened to be in town, a stroke of luck that felt like providence, and he agreed to perform the ceremony that very evening in the small church building the town had erected more in hope than actual faith. Catherine borrowed a dress from the store owner's wife, a kind woman who took one look at the situation and insisted on helping, and Cole wore his one good shirt that Catherine had laundered until it was nearly white again. Thomas and Emma stood up with them as witnesses, their faces scrubbed clean and shining with excitement, and the preacher led them through the traditional vows. Cole's voice was steady as he promised to love and cherish Catherine all the days of his life, and her voice was clear and certain as she made the same promises in return. They exchanged the simple gold band, and when the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Cole kissed his bride with all the love in his heart while the children cheered, and the few townspeople who had gathered applauded. That night in the room they rented at the town's boarding house, Cole and Catherine truly became husband and wife in every sense. Their joining was tender and passionate, a celebration of love hard-won and freely given, and afterward Catherine lay in Cole's arms and whispered that she had never been so happy, never felt so complete. They spent 3 days in Castle Dome conducting business, and it was during this time that Cole made a decision about the reward notice he had seen months ago. He drafted a careful letter to the family back east, explaining that Catherine Keller and the children were safe and well, that Catherine had married and was raising Thomas and Emma in a good home, that there was no need for concern or further searching. He did not give their exact location, only said they were settled in Wyoming territory and asked that the family respect their privacy and their choices. Catherine read the letter and agreed it was the right thing to do, and they posted it before leaving town. Whatever response came, if any, would reach them eventually, but for now they had done their duty to the past while protecting their future. The journey back to the cabin felt like a homecoming in the truest sense. Everything looked different to Cole now, brighter and more beautiful, because he was seeing it through the eyes of a man who had everything he wanted. Catherine rode beside him with Emma in her arms, and Thomas walked alongside, chattering about everything he had seen in town, and Cole thought that his heart might burst from the sheer joy of it all. Spring unfolded across the mountain in waves of green and gold, wildflowers blooming in the meadows and animals emerging from winter dens. Cole worked the trap lines less now, focusing instead on building up the homestead, clearing land for a proper garden and constructing a chicken coop in anticipation of the hens he had ordered in town. Catherine planted seeds she had purchased, vegetables and herbs that would help them be more self-sufficient, and she worked beside him in the garden with dirt under her nails and sunshine on her face, more beautiful than any city lady in silk and jewels. Thomas proved to have a gift for animal husbandry, taking to the chickens when they arrived with such enthusiasm that Cole built him a special feed bucket and put him in charge of their care. Emma helped Catherine in the garden, her small hands gentle with the fragile seedlings, and the sound of their voices singing together while they worked became the soundtrack of Cole's days. Summer brought its own challenges and joys. The garden flourished, providing fresh vegetables that tasted like heaven after a winter of preserved food. Cole hunted deer and elk, smoking the meat for the coming winter, and taught Thomas to fish in the mountain streams. Catherine preserved everything she could, filling the shelves with jars of vegetables and fruits gathered from wild berry bushes, her capable hands never idle. It was in late July that Catherine came to him with news that made his heart leap. She was with child, a baby due in the early spring, and Cole swept her up in his arms and spun her around despite her laughing protests that he would make her dizzy. Thomas and Emma were thrilled at the prospect of a baby brother or sister, already arguing good-naturedly about names and making plans for how they would help. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, Catherine blooming with health despite the hard work of mountain life. Cole found himself more protective than ever, insisting she rest more and take on less strenuous tasks, but Catherine refused to be treated as fragile. She was strong, she reminded him, and women had been having babies while working hard since the beginning of time. Autumn arrived with its usual spectacular display of color, and they worked together to prepare for winter, this time with the confidence of experience and the resources of careful planning. The cellar was full, the smokehouse packed with meat, the firewood stacked high and dry. They were ready for whatever the mountain winter might bring on a crisp October evening. As they sat around the fire with the children drowsy and content, Thomas asked a question that had clearly been on his mind. "Papa Cole," he said, the title he had taken to using with pride, "will you tell us about how you found us?" Cole glanced at Catherine, who nodded encouragingly, and he began the story of that day in early autumn when he had heard crying in the woods, and found 3 lost souls who would change his life forever. He told it honestly, leaving out nothing, and when he finished, Emma was crying happy tears and Thomas was looking at him with such love and gratitude that Cole had to clear his throat roughly. "We were so scared," Emma said. "But then you came and everything got better." "You saved us," Thomas added. "You saved all of us." "I think maybe you saved me too," Cole said honestly, pulling Catherine close against his side. "I was lost in my own way, alone on this mountain, and you all taught me what it means to have a family, to have something worth living for beyond just survival." Winter that year was hard but bearable, the 4 of them, soon to be 5, snug and warm in their expanded cabin. Catherine's belly grew round with their child, and Cole would lie with his hand on her stomach at night, feeling the baby kick and move, filled with wonder at the miracle of new life. Thomas and Emma were excited helpers, fetching things for Catherine and listening raptly to her stories about what the baby would be like. The baby came early one morning in March, arriving with the first crocuses blooming through the melting snow. Catherine labored through the night with Cole at her side, his hand held tight in hers, and when their son finally slipped into the world with a lusty cry, Cole felt tears stream down his face. He cut the cord with trembling hands and placed the baby in Catherine's arms, this tiny perfect being they had created together, and knew that his life was complete. They named him James, after Cole's father, and Thomas and Emma were permitted to meet their baby brother that same day, their faces full of wonder as they touched his tiny fingers and marveled at how small he was. Emma declared herself his protector, and Thomas promised to teach him everything important when he got bigger, and Cole thought his heart might actually burst from happiness. The years that followed were full and rich, each season bringing its own joys and challenges. A daughter, Alice, arrived 2 years after James, and then another son, Robert, 2 years after that. The cabin expanded further, rooms added to accommodate their growing family, and the homestead flourished under their combined efforts. Thomas grew into a strong, capable young man, taking on more and more responsibility for the trap lines and hunting. He had Cole's steadiness and Catherine's quick mind, and Cole was proud of the person he was becoming. Emma developed into a beautiful young woman with her aunt's grace and kindness, helping with the younger children and proving to be as skilled at healing work as Catherine had become over the years. The family they had built was strong and loving, rooted in the mountain soil and the bonds they had forged through hardship and hope. Cole had never imagined himself capable of such happiness, never dreamed that the sound of crying in the woods would lead him to everything he had ever wanted without knowing it. Castle Dome grew over the years, becoming less of a rough mining camp and more of a proper town with a school and a church and regular law. Cole and Catherine became known in the community as solid, respectable people, and their children were welcomed and accepted without question. No one knew or cared about the unusual circumstances of their beginning, only that the Finnegan family were good neighbors and honest folk. The letter from Catherine's family back east finally arrived 3 years after Cole had sent his message, brought by a traveling peddler who made regular rounds through the mountain settlements. Her cousin wrote that while the family had been shocked by Catherine's choices, they respected her right to make her own life and wished her well. There was no demand to see the children, no threats or ultimatums, only an olive branch and an invitation to write if she ever wished to reconnect. Catherine cried over that letter, tears of relief and release, and she did eventually write back, beginning a correspondence that brought her peace about the past while never threatening the present. Pictures were exchanged, and news of births and deaths and marriages, and gradually the rift that had separated her from her family healed enough that it no longer caused pain. Through it all, Cole and Catherine's love deepened and matured, growing from the passionate intensity of those early days into something richer and more enduring. They had weathered storms both literal and metaphorical, had faced down hardship and uncertainty, and had come through it all stronger together than either could have been apart. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Cole took Catherine back to the spot where he had first found her, that clearing in the woods where she had stood protecting Thomas and Emma with nothing but a branch and fierce determination. The children, all 5 of them, followed behind, and Cole told the story again, this tradition they had developed of remembering their beginning. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had gone a different direction that day," Cole said, his arm around Catherine's waist. "If I had been hunting in another part of the forest, if I had not heard the crying." "I do not think about that," Catherine said firmly, "because I believe we were meant to find each other, that God or fate or whatever force guides the universe brought us together exactly when we needed each other most. You heard me when I needed help, and I saw you when you needed family. That is what matters." Cole kissed his wife then, in front of their children and the forest and the wide blue sky, and he knew she was right. Their story might have started with tears and tragedy, but it had become something beautiful, a testament to resilience and love and the power of 2 broken people to make each other whole. The children groaned good-naturedly at their parents' display of affection, and they all walked back to the cabin together, the sound of their voices and laughter echoing through the trees that had witnessed their beginning. Inside, Catherine prepared their favorite meal while the older children helped and the younger ones played, and Cole sat near the fire with baby Robert on his knee, watching his family with deep contentment. This was his legacy, he thought, not the solitary mountain man who had fled civilization's noise, but the husband and father who had found his purpose in protecting and providing for those he loved. Every day was a gift, every moment with Catherine and the children precious beyond measure, and he had learned to treasure them all. As the years continued to pass, the pattern of their life remained steady and good. Thomas married a girl from Castle Dome and built his own cabin on land Cole deeded to him, close enough to visit regularly, but far enough to give the young couple privacy. Emma became the closest thing to a doctor the mountain communities had, learning healing arts from Catherine and a traveling physician who passed through periodically. James, Alice, and Robert grew strong and healthy, each with their own personalities and gifts. James had his father's love of solitude and the wild, spending hours exploring the forest. Alice was the scholar, devouring every book that came into her hands and teaching herself to read Latin from an old text Cole had traded for. Robert was the charmer, able to talk his way into or out of anything with his ready smile and quick wit. Cole and Catherine aged together gracefully, their hair going gray and their hands growing rough with work, but their love never dimming. They would sit on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over the mountains they had claimed as home, and marvel at the life they had built from that desperate beginning. "Do you ever miss Philadelphia?" Cole asked one evening, a question he had wondered about but never quite dared to voice. Catherine considered it thoughtfully. "I miss some things," she admitted. "The theaters and libraries, the convenience of shops and doctors nearby, but I would not trade this life for that one, not for anything. Here I have freedom and purpose and you. That is worth more than all the civilized comforts in the world." "I am glad," Cole said simply, taking her hand, "because I cannot imagine my life without you in it. And you will never have to," Catherine promised. "We have built something lasting here, Cole, something that will endure long after we are gone. Our children and their children will remember this place and the love that made it a home." She was right, as she so often was. The homestead continued to thrive, becoming a landmark in the region, the Finnegan place where travelers could always find a meal and a safe place to rest. Cole and Catherine's children grew and had children of their own, carrying forward the values of hard work and hospitality and fierce family loyalty that their parents had instilled. Thomas and Emma never forgot that they had been orphaned and lost, that Catherine had risked everything to keep them safe, that Cole had opened his home and heart to strangers. They passed those stories down to their own children, keeping the memory alive of how their family had come to be, of the crying in the woods that had changed everything. Cole lived to see his grandchildren grow, to hold great-grandchildren in his arms, and every day he gave thanks for the gift he had been given. Catherine was his partner in everything, still beautiful to him even with silver hair and laugh lines around her eyes, still the woman he would choose above all others in any life or any world. They were sitting on the porch one autumn evening, similar to so many others they had shared, when Catherine turned to him with a serious expression. "Cole," she said, "I want you to know that I have been happier with you than I ever dreamed possible. You gave me and the children a home when we had nothing, and you gave me love when I thought I was too practical to need it. Thank you for hearing my cry that day, for not turning away, for choosing us." Cole felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Catherine, you were the best thing that ever happened to me. You and those children, you saved me from a half-life of loneliness. I was existing before you came, but I was not truly living. You taught me how to love again, how to hope again, how to build something that matters. So thank you for staying, for loving me back, for making these mountains a home instead of just a hiding place." They held each other as the sun set, two people who had found each other against all odds and built a love story for the ages. Around them, the sounds of family filled the air, grandchildren playing in the yard, children and their spouses preparing the evening meal, the comfortable chaos of a large, loving family going about the business of living. Cole Finnegan had come to the Wyoming mountains to escape the world, to find peace in solitude and silence. Instead, he had found everything he had ever needed in the crying of a child and the fierce courage of a woman protecting her sister's babies. He had found love and purpose and a legacy that would outlive him, all because he had chosen to investigate a sound in the woods instead of walking away. And Catherine Keller, who had set out on an impossible journey to honor a deathbed promise, had found not just safety for the children she loved but a partner who cherished her, a home that welcomed her, and a love that completed her. She had lost her sister, but gained a husband and a life beyond anything she could have imagined in her Philadelphia boarding house, dreaming of escape and adventure. Their story was not one of perfect people or easy choices, but of two souls who found each other when they needed it most and chose to build something beautiful from desperate circumstances. It was a story of courage and compassion, of resilience and redemption, of the Wild West at its most challenging and most rewarding. As the years continued and time marched forward, the Finnegan family remained a cornerstone of their community, known for their generosity and strength. The original cabin, expanded and improved over the decades, became a gathering place for the scattered mountain families, hosting weddings and celebrations, and serving as a refuge during hard times. Cole and Catherine had created more than just a family. They had built a legacy of love that touched everyone who knew them. Their story was told and retold, becoming part of local legend, the mountain man and the lost woman who found each other and created something extraordinary from their unlikely meeting. When Cole finally passed away at the age of 76, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, his last words were for Catherine. "Thank you," he whispered, "for that day in the woods, for every day after, for everything." Catherine, still sharp and strong at 74, held his hand and kissed his forehead. "We will meet again," she promised, "and I will find you, even in whatever woods exist beyond this life." She lived another 3 years, seeing to the family and the homestead with the same determination that had carried her through so many challenges. When she joined Cole, it was peacefully in her sleep, and her children said that she looked happy, as though she had indeed found her way back to the man she loved. They were buried together on the mountain they had called home, under tall pines with a view of the valleys below. The headstone was simple, listing their names and dates and a single line that Thomas had chosen. They heard each other's call and answered. The homestead continued under the care of their descendants, each generation adding their own chapter to the story, while honoring the foundation that Cole and Catherine had built. The love they had shared, born from a desperate cry in the wilderness, had created ripples that spread outward through time, touching lives and shaping futures in ways they could never have imagined. And on quiet autumn evenings, when the wind moved through the pines just right, some said you could hear the echo of that long-ago crying, the sound that had brought two lost souls together and started a legacy of love that would endure for generations. It was a reminder that the most extraordinary things can come from the most desperate moments, that helping a stranger can change not just their life but your own, and that love, when it is true and deep and freely given, can transform the wilderness into a garden and strangers into family. The story of Cole Finnegan and Catherine Keller became more than just family history. It became a testament to the power of compassion, the strength of love, and the beauty that can emerge when two people choose to face life's challenges together. In the Wild West, where survival often meant looking out only for yourself, they had chosen differently, and in doing so had created something rare and precious and lasting. Their great-great-grandchildren still walked the land they had claimed, still tended gardens planted from seeds Catherine had saved, still told stories around fires Cole had taught them to build. The cabin had been rebuilt and modernized over the years, but the original hearthstone remained, a tangible connection to the couple who had started it all with nothing but determination and love. And in the end, that was the true measure of their lives, not in the acreage they had claimed or the children they had raised or the hardships they had overcome, but in the love they had shared and the legacy of that love that continued to bless everyone who came after. They had heard each other's call in that Wyoming wilderness so many years ago, and they had answered with open hearts, creating a story that would inspire and endure for as long as the mountains stood and the wind whispered through the pines. Their love had been tested by distance and hardship, by uncertainty and fear, by the harsh realities of frontier life and the challenges of blending a family from broken pieces. But they had met every test with courage and commitment, building something stronger with each trial overcome. They had shown that family was not just about blood but about choice, about choosing each other every day, about creating bonds that were stronger than any challenge life could throw at them. The mountain that had been Cole's refuge became their kingdom. The forest that had hidden Catherine's tears became the garden where their children played and learned and grew. The Wild West, with all its dangers and difficulties, became the backdrop for a love story that proved gentle hearts could survive in harsh places, that kindness was not weakness but the greatest strength of all. And so the story ended, not with tragedy or loss, but with the quiet satisfaction of lives well lived and love well shared, with generations continuing the work that two people had started with nothing but hope and determination. The crying in the woods had been answered, the lost had been found, and from that meeting had come a love that would echo through the ages, a reminder that sometimes the most important thing we can do is simply listen for those who need us and have the courage to answer when we hear their call.